he talked about how the radical left was responsible for this demonization of their opponents, and this could not be allowed to continue. And we got a little bit more detail on what that means, I think, during this, because I think the most significant guest was Stephen Miller, who's a senior policy advisor and in the White House to Trump, and very close to the top of the administration. And it was Stephen Miller who was basically saying that a vast domestic terror movement exists in America that's behind the killing of Charlie Kirk.
It is that time of night again. Good evening, by the way. It's Kate Borsey. It's the evening edition, and it's time for our daily dose of the Trump dump, connecting with one of the Times US team. I'm pleased to say that David Charter, the US assistant editor for the Times, is with us. David, good evening.
Good afternoon from Washington, D.C.
It's the start of a dizzying week, isn't it, David, as we anticipate the arrival of Donald Trump tomorrow. We'll talk in a little while, actually, about what we're to expect from the state visit this week. You'll be covering it feverishly, I'm sure, and there's plenty of the Times team across it as well, so something to look forward to. Let's deal a little more in the immediate to start off with, if that's okay. The Vice President, J.D. Vance, has hosted Charlie Kirk's podcast this afternoon and was joined by major government officials, including the White House Deputy Chief of Staff and the Secretary of State for Health, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Let's hear a bit of it. Vance criticised those who celebrated the death of Charlie Kirk, who was shot in the neck last week in Utah.
There is no unity with people who scream at children over their parents' politics. There is no unity with someone who lies about what Charlie Kirk said in order to excuse his murder. There is no unity with someone who harasses an innocent family the day after the father of that family lost a dear friend. There is no unity with the people who celebrate Charlie Kirk's assassination. And there is no unity with the people who fund these articles, who pay the salaries of these terrorist sympathizers, who argue that Charlie Kirk, a loving husband and father, deserved a shot to the neck because he spoke words with which they disagree.
Yeah, I mean, the style is one thing. I thought podcasts were meant to be kind of intimate and welcoming. J.D. Vance speaking with great passion there. And look, fair enough, bearing in mind the subject matter. What else did we hear in this podcast if we're to talk about the most memorable moments? I know the White House press secretary was on it as well, I think.
Yeah, you can hear the anger in the vice president's voice there as he echoes Donald Trump, the president, who talked about in his initial Oval Office reaction, he talked about how the radical left was responsible for this demonization of their opponents, and this could not be allowed to continue. And we got a little bit more detail on what that means, I think, during this, because I think the most significant guest was Stephen Miller, who's a senior policy advisor and in the White House to Trump, and very close to the top of the administration. And it was Stephen Miller who was basically saying that a vast domestic terror movement exists in America that's behind the killing of Charlie Kirk, and that he vowed to channel the anger felt in America about this assassination to dismantle this vast domestic terror movement. And so far from the message of unity that you heard Vice President Vance utterly rejecting as well, this seems to be the beginning of a concerted campaign to make people pay, in fact, to spread this to whatever groups that can be connected to the kind of invective that the Republican side, the MAGA side, I suppose I should say, is talking about at the moment. It is in contrast to what we heard from the Republican governor of Utah, Spencer Cox, who was saying that this is a moment where it's acknowledging, of course, it's a dark moment for America, but it's a choice whether it gets darker or we come together as a country. And I've seen some MAGA activists online casting aspersions about Spencer Cox and saying, is he with us or not? It doesn't sound like he is.
Gosh. Yeah, it seems only heightened language is the flavour of the day. As you say, a vast domestic terror movement which cites, terrorism, left-wing terrorism, which is quite something. I think we also had a bit more detail, didn't we, on the alleged gunman who killed Kirk last Wednesday, Tyler Robinson. And this concerns, details yesterday indeed, that he'd been radicalised by dark places on the internet after he'd dropped out of university. This was from Spencer Cox, as you said, the governor of Utah.
That's right. More details are emerging. How he was, it seemed he was in a relationship with a transgender woman. How he shared details in a Discord group with friends that it's claimed. I haven't seen this, but it's being reported that in the Discord group he did admit that it was him. We've yet to see that officially confirmed. And we will get tomorrow on Tuesday the first court appearance, and that's when we'll know exactly what he's going to be charged with, and there could be more details officially released, I think.
Okay. We've got Trump making an announcement this evening, I understand, David, around 9 o'clock our time, 4 o'clock your time. Have we got any understanding about what that might be?
No, I don't know what that one is. That's in the diary as an announcement, but we don't know what that's concerning at the moment. Of course, there's been plenty of other things going on as well that it could touch on. As we know that Trump's going to go to the big memorial funeral service that's being planned for Charlie Kirk in Arizona in a massive football stadium next Sunday. That's going to be a huge, almost like a state funeral type event in America that's going to get a lot of coverage. And in fact, very interestingly, you heard, as I say, we talked about the anger in J.D. Vance's voice taking over from Charlie Kirk's podcast today. He actually said at one point, if it weren't for Charlie Kirk, I would not be the vice president of the United States. And this is alluding to the way that he was so well plugged in with Trump and the administration, the putative administration, that he advocated for Vance to be the running mate.
We spoke to Bob McEwen last week as, sadly, the announcement of the death of Charlie Kirk was made. Bob McEwen is a former senior Republican congressman and a board member of Turning Point USA, and a very close friend of Charlie Kirk's. And he said the same thing, that he believed Charlie was absolutely essential, pivotal in J.D. Vance getting the job, that it had been a recommendation of Charlie Kirk to Donald Trump to bring Vance into Trump's administration. Shall we direct our attention to the US and China reaching a deal on TikTok? This has been sort of rumbling away for, years, but in reality, the last few months, really questions about where Donald Trump goes next on this decision. They reached a framework agreement, the US and China, on transferring TikTok to US-controlled ownership. Secretary to the Treasury Scott Bessent and the US Trade Representative Jamieson Greer spoke positively about the deal after economic talks between the two countries finished in Madrid.
We have a framework for a TikTok deal. The two leaders, President Trump and Party Chair Xi, will speak on Friday to complete the deal, but we do have a framework for a deal with TikTok.
We were very focused on TikTok and making sure that it was a deal that is fair for the Chinese and completely respects U.S. national security concerns. And that's the deal we reached. And of course, we want to ensure that the Chinese have a fair investment environment in the United States, but always that U.S. national security comes first.
Warm words towards China there, David, I think.
Yeah, the administration has been very keen in recent months to settle this dispute with China because they've got enough plates spinning on the economy at the moment, with the tariffs on neighboring countries like Canada and Mexico, which are really disrupting trade, not to mention the general tariffs that have been brought in by Trump under all his emergency measures to correct the trade imbalances in America. And this TikTok thing, though, has been rumbling on, as you say, for at least a year, I think Congress passed a law that mandated the administration to divest TikTok from its Chinese ownership, but on national security grounds. But Trump has 3 times he's extended the deadline, and what Focus Minds this time was the deadline of Wednesday, which was going to be the final. TikTok was going to have to go dark in America, and they've used that to leverage an agreement, which we don't really know exactly what it is, but it clearly both sides seem happy that they've prepared the ground for Trump to announce on Friday with Xi, the Chinese leader, after their phone call, that TikTok is going to stay live. And we know that Trump is that's what he wanted all along, really, because he keeps saying how much TikTok helped him reach younger voters in America. He's got 15 million followers on TikTok, and they used it so much better than the Democrats in the election.
Interesting. Okay. The state visit. Let's talk about that briefly. The president will board Air Force One tomorrow, arriving at Stansted for a historic 3-day state visit. Trump will be entertained by the King at Windsor Castle before heading to Chequers to meet with Keir Starmer. We hear maybe he'll have a few words for us, David, as he disembarks from Air Force One. It is a possibility that we might hear from the president tomorrow night, isn't it?
Well, he's not a shy man, so yes, I think it's very, very likely he could say a few words. He will have a lot of other things on his mind, of course, because he's been issuing various ultimatums, not least to NATO, to, if they want more American pressure on Russia to end the Ukraine war, for example. He said to NATO that you've all got to, everyone who's a member of NATO has got to stop buying any Russian oil products. And that's it's actually a rather high bar, because Turkey is the 3rd biggest purchaser of Russian oil still, and obviously a key member of NATO. So there's an awful lot going on besides the state visit, but it's going to come as a welcome break, I think, from the pressures of Washington, and perhaps also for the Prime Minister. I heard there's some little bit of local difficulty in London at the moment.
To put it lightly, we were just musing earlier whether Trump will do Starmer a solid, David Charter, and say some nice words about him to deflect from the chaos that engulfs our Prime Minister at the moment. He might well do, or, I mean, Donald Trump famously doesn't like people who are, well, I don't know if this is famously, but I mean, he's always very nice about people when he goes to visit them, especially this state visit. He's normally pretty sort of polite about people, but he generally doesn't like people that are on the downturn, does he? That are sort of, becoming colder on the sort of temperature gauge of hot or not.
I guess that could be a consideration, especially as he senses that Nigel Farage, who's a close ally, does stand a chance to benefit from all this. But I do think, bearing in mind how much President Trump was really on his best behavior in 2019 for the first state visit, you'll bear in mind it was 2018 where there was the kerfuffle over walking in front of the Queen at the inspection of troops. That was at Windsor, by the way, so we're going to be back at Windsor for the start of this, and see if they can get the inspection pitch perfect this time. But partly because of that storm in a teacup, the Trump really was trying to make sure that the state visit in 2019 went off to the letter by the book, and it went really, really well. Everybody involved, when I speak to them, they say that it couldn't have gone any better, really. There was a lot of the Trump family there. We're not sure how many of them will accompany him this time, but all of his adult children took part in the state dinner, state banquet in 2019, and they all thoroughly enjoyed themselves. And of course, it was all going swimmingly. We were going to get a trade deal and everything, but unfortunately, a big row broke out about a previous ambassador, and it's just shortly after that state visit. So, ambassadorial problems aside, I do think that the Trump administration is absolutely determined that this goes off perfectly, and they've got a lot of things in their back pocket to offer the Brits on trade and nuclear power. Nuclear technology and other technological tech deals. That's right. Bringing some of the richest men in the world will be over as well to do some deals.
Awesome. Well, look, let's hope it helps Starmer's cause. David Charter, thanks for being with us, US Assistant Editor for The Times. You can read David's work at thetimes.com and in the paper and, of course, the wider US team as well.